First, the USDA's Justice for All non-discriminatory statement, which simply states that all persons must be treated equally without regard to their race, color, national origin, sex, religious creed, disability, age, political beliefs, or reprisal or retaliation for prior civil rights activity, and that our institution provides an inclusive space for all. For more information on the And Justice for All statement, please visit the USDA's website.
Today I'm going to be making one of my favorite recipes, which is 3-can chili. It's a kid-tested, family-approved recipe. It's healthy, easy, affordable, and delicious. I chose this recipe because it fits in with today's topic of stretching food dollars. And while we prepare the recipe, I'm going to be sharing a number of tips that will help you shop healthily for your family while sticking to your budget. So, our main ingredients today couldn't be more simple. Can of corn, big can of tomatoes, and then a can of beans. And on top of that, any of your favorite chili spices. We're going to talk through the ones that I chose for today. I'm going to be making this really basic version of a chili recipe to demonstrate how you can throw a meal together for your family in less than 15 minutes using only a few pantry staple ingredients. But we're also going to talk about things that you can add, things that you can change to this recipe to spice it up a bit. I call this recipe a pantry cleaner. It's a great opportunity to save some money and use some products that have been sitting in your pantry shelf for a while. Just be sure to check those expiration dates. It's very flexible. You can use any type of bean that you have on hand. I'm using white beans today because that's what I had. You can even substitute out dried beans instead of using the canned beans for an even cheaper option, as long as you have time to soak them in advance. You can use any type of canned tomato. I like using diced tomatoes. I like having chunky bits of tomato in my chili. Some people prefer it to be soupier, so if that's the case, you can either go with crushed tomato or tomato sauce to get a bit of a saucier texture to it. And sometimes I also throw in some low sodium vegetable broth as well to thin it out a bit if it turns out too tomatoey. But again, the point is to use whatever you have on hand so that this meal is as inexpensive as possible. This is meant to be an easy weeknight meal that you can throw together for your family in under 15 minutes. And maybe your family can even help with this recipe, especially if you have older kids that are able to use a stovetop or a burner. Maybe they can even make this meal for themselves. So let's talk about add-ons. I've brought out a lot of things that I like to throw in my chili when I have them on hand. The first thing is extra veggies. I like to load up on the veggies whenever possible. So things like some onion, some bell peppers, and some jalapeno peppers can all be great options. Again, if you don't have these fresh on hand, you can always use canned version of them. Sometimes I add even things like potatoes or squash if I have them on hand and I want to use them before they go bad. Even canned pumpkin puree can be really nice for a nice seasonal fall chili. And then there's the spices. So chili is really versatile. You can add all of your favorite spices in there. The ones that I'm going to be using today are paprika, chili powder, cumin, garlic powder, salt, and pepper. But there's so many different things you can do. A lot of people like throwing cinnamon and nutmeg in their chili as well. Those can be great options. And then there's the toppings. So many great toppings for chili. Some options that you have. Low-fat shredded cheese can be a great one. We've got some plain non-fat yogurt. This is a healthy substitution for sour cream. It has less fat, but still will add that creaminess to it. Then we've got some crushed up tortilla chips. And then even a little sprinkle of lime on top can be a nice topping as well. So, and I know some of you all are probably already thinking, where's the meat? Why is there no meat in this recipe? Our basic version of this chili recipe doesn't have any meat in it. And that's in order to keep this recipe inexpensive, shelf stable, and quick to put together. Adding meat is going to make this recipe more expensive. It's going to make it go bad faster. You have to use it all within a few days. And it's going to take longer to prepare. What's more, the beans in this recipe are going to provide plenty of protein to the meal, and they're also going to add fiber, which is going to help you feel full and satisfied. But even despite all that, if you have meat on hand that you want to add to this recipe, feel free. We do recommend you use a lean type of meat. That's a meat that's low in saturated fat. So some good options would be some shredded chicken breast or ground turkey. I picked up some ground turkey that was on sale at the grocery store a few weeks ago. It's been sitting in my freezer ever since, so I'm probably going to cook that later on and add it into this chili. But it really doesn't need a lot of meat to it, especially with the beans. It's going to make it so filling. And sometimes when I don't have any meat on hand, I keep it entirely meatless. So, assembling this recipe couldn't be any easier. The first step is just to open the cans. Make sure to drain and rinse them to remove any excess sodium. And then after that, we are just adding the ingredients to the pot. And then after that, we're going to add our toppings to it, or our seasonings rather. And from here, we are just going to put it on the stove and cook it over medium heat until it's heated thoroughly. So the reason that this recipe is so fast and so easy is because we're using shelf-stable ingredients and we don't have any meat in here. There's nothing that needs to cook necessarily for food safety purposes. It doesn't have to reach a boil or cook through the way that it would if it would have ground turkey in here or anything like that. Instead, all we're really looking for is that it's up to temperature so that it's ready to serve. If we want to leave it on for a little bit longer, it's going to give the ingredients a little bit more time to absorb some of the spices, which is always a good thing. But really, all you need is to bring it up to temperature and get it ready to serve, which is why it's so great as a weeknight meal. And again, this recipe is a hit just because of how simple it is. There's 1,000,001 different ways to make chili, but all you really need is corn or some type of veggie, some type of tomato product as a base, and then beans to add a little protein and make it super filling, and whatever your favorite seasonings are. So while our chili's heating up, let's go over some money-saving tips that can make this recipe and others even cheaper to make. We'll start out by going over some tips that you can keep in mind while you're at home and you're planning your food shopping for the week. So tip number 1 is make a grocery list and stick to it. If you take the time to write out your list based on the meals you want to make that week, it's going to make your shopping experience even easier, and it's going to help you avoid temptation of going down an aisle and getting things because you see them and they look good, rather than knowing that it's an ingredient that you need for the week. Tip number 2 is to keep your kitchen cabinets organized so that you don't buy what you don't need. I've definitely have this happen before, where I look through my cabinets, I don't see something, so I buy it when I'm at the store, and then when I get home I realize I did have it, it was just tucked in the back in my pantry where I couldn't see it. So if you can keep your kitchen cabinets organized, if you can have a set place for things, it will help you save money by not accidentally buying things that you already have at home. Tip number 3 is to eat before you go food shopping. If you are hungry, you will be tempted to buy foods that are not on your list. My old weekend routine was I would wake up Saturday mornings and I would go to the gym, and then on the way home from the gym, I would stop at the grocery store and get everything that I needed for the week. Some smarter people than myself probably already realized that this is a problem, because every week by the time I got to the grocery store, I would be starving from exercising. So as a result of that, I've switched up my weekend routine, and I go to the gym Saturday mornings and I go to the grocery store Sunday mornings. Or at the very least, I have a light snack before I go to the grocery store, just so that I'm not starving by the time I get there. And then the last tip for when you are at home coming up with your grocery list for the week is to watch flyers for sales and compare prices at different stores. So a lot of grocery stores will send their circulars out via the mail. That can be a good way to see sales, what's going to be have special deals when you get to the store. You can pick these up when you get to the store, but I think it's super helpful to look through these as you're coming up with your grocery list and your meal plan for the week. So if these aren't something that you get normally in the mail, another great way to find this information is to look on your grocery store's website. Most grocery stores these days will put their sale information online in advance. I like having that up as I'm coming up with my meal plan for the week and really basing my meal plan around what is going to be on sale. Alright, let me check on the chili real quick, make sure it's heating up nicely. It's starting to bubble, it's looking good. Alright, so now let's go over some tips for while you're at the grocery store. The first tip is to buy unprepared foods instead of convenience foods. An example of this could be buying fruits and vegetables in their whole form rather than buying ones that have been peeled and chopped in advance. When stores do that work for you, when they peel and chop and make things ready to go, you are going to pay a price for that convenience. They're going to be more expensive than buying things in their whole form. So if you're willing to put in the work, if you're willing to do a little extra work, spend a little time peeling fruits and vegetables, dicing them, getting them ready to prepare, it can be a great way to save money, is to buy those unprepared versions of foods. Tip number 2 is to buy generic brand foods instead of name brand. They're usually just as good and tend to cost less money. So figure out what the store brand is at whatever store you shop at and compare the prices of those store brand items to the name brand items. It usually is that the store brand, the generic version, tends to be cheaper and it tends to be almost exactly the same item. Tip number 3 is to buy dried beans, peas, lentils, and other dried items in order to make easy, cheap, low-cost meals like soups and casseroles. Again, these things are going to be great sources of protein and fiber, so they're going to make really filling meals for you, and they tend to be very cheap. The dried ingredients tend to be even cheaper than canned versions. Alright, our chili has come to a boil. It seems like it's heated all the way through. So let's go ahead and serve that and throw on some of our toppings as well, and then we will be good to go. Alright, so I've got my chili here. It's looking pretty good. Nice and saucy. It seems like those seasonings have mixed fairly well. And now I'm just going to throw on a bunch of toppings to make it even tastier. So I've got my shredded cheese. I've got my yogurt. And I've got my crushed up tortilla chips as well. Gonna add a nice little crunch to it. Gonna add a creaminess from the yogurt and the cheese as well. And I'll probably throw a little bit of hot sauce on here too to make it a little bit spicier as well. So hopefully you can see this, check it out. It's looking pretty tasty. And again, we threw this together in under 15 minutes. This can be a really filling meal that can feed a whole family, maybe even for multiple meals. So, thank you for everyone who tuned in to this cooking demonstration. I hope you all try this recipe at home with your families. I think it'll be a hit.